I'm Tommy Evans from I'm Tommy Evans from DROIDS Recording Studio, and ever since I posted that why you should be using templates video, one of the questions that I get asked the most is how do you make a template? So we're going to jump into the studio, into this computer right here, and I'm going to show you how that I make my templates right after this intro. Okay, here we are inside the computer. Now I'm going to try and efficiently tell you what it is that I'm doing and why I'm doing it as we get along here. So the first thing that I'm going to do when I'm creating this template is I'm going to make some guitar tracks. I like them to be red, yeah. Oh, let's do 6 maybe. They'll be mono. Let's say this is going to be our guitar rhythm left. This will be the guitar rhythm on the right side. This might be a lead number 1. We'll call that guitar lead 2. And then these last two, we'll just say clean guitar 1 and 2. So there. Just kind of having bare minimum to cover enough of a variety that you might receive. Now, in making this template, one of the first things that I'm doing, okay, well, before I go there, let's check this out. If you don't actually receive a WAV file of a live guitar cab being recorded, which is, if you get that, it's cool, then just EQ it and, mix it to taste. But if you do not get one of those, then you're going to get a guitar DI track instead. If you do get one of those, then you can use these cool guitar VST plugins. One of my favorites lately has been by STL Tonality, Will Putney. Shout out STL, shout out Will Putney. We'll leave that on there and we'll turn it off for now. I'll show you why in a second. Another one that I've been liking lately is the Neural DSP Fortin Nameless. That one is a beast on just about everything. Let that load for a sec. Shout out Neural DSP. Close that. And then you know what? Let's do a wild card, man. Let's put a Tone Forge Menace in there just so we can have some fun. Leave that in there. Turn it off for now. Now, the reason why we're turning all of these off for now is this. Let me actually show you. So say you get a song to mix, whether you download it from a website or you get it from another engineer elsewhere. Say you pull in a guitar track, like this one, for example. You can actually listen to this thing and A/B all of these plugins like this. So there, if you've got your favorite 1, 2, or 3, or I don't know, 5 VST guitar plugins ready to go that you can audition one after the other, wonderful. Pull in that guitar DI, audition each of these VSTs one at a time, and then if you find the one that you just love right then and there, delete the other ones, man, because you don't need them anymore. In addition to the guitar VSTs, I know that I usually, always usually, like an EQ at the end of my chain. The low end on my guitars usually start to roll off around 80 something, so we'll let that float around there somewhere. And believe it or not, I also like to compress my guitars as well. I think the API 2500 is the one that I like. Yeah, that's the one. Now, after some experimentation, and because I've been doing this for long enough, I already know that if you load up the presets and go to guitar, the guitar rhythm preset for this particular compressor is the one that I like the most, and it's the one that kind of fits the way that I want it to fit in. The attack, the ratio, and the release, I don't touch those because I know I already like them, but I do set the threshold way up here to plus 10 for now, because the threshold is going to always be different depending on, what the source is that I'm coming in. So just quickly, for example, this one here, let's say I liked the Fortin Nameless on this thing. I'll turn the EQ back on. What I'm looking for when I'm EQing these rhythm guitars is I just want to do maybe 2 or 3 or 4 dBs of gain reduction on the palm muted chuggy parts. Let's see what we get. Yeah, maybe there's something like that. You can see that the needle was hitting 3 decibels of gain reduction when the guitars are doing the da-da-da-da-da-da-da part. That's the heaviest part of the song, so I want to make sure that, we're just taking off about 3-ish dBs of gain reduction on the rhythm guitars. Just me. So having all that ready to go, excuse me, when you load up your template, it's just super handy. Since we've got 2 rhythm tracks, I'm just going to copy this whole chain and throw it over here to this rhythm right guitar. Let's do a lead. We'll probably use one of these same guitar VSTs for the lead, but what's going to be different about the lead tracks is that I'm probably going to end up using a delay. I'll send that to ascend, and you'll notice that a new effects track opened up called beat delay. I'm going to call that guitar lead delay. And sometimes if I don't use delay, I will end up using reverb on a lead guitar. Sometimes I might use both, but usually it's one or the other. Room reverb, I'll add that down there as well. You'll see another room reverb effects track popped up. Let's call that guitar lead verb, and we'll just let that sit there. And since we've got 2 lead tracks, I'm just going to copy the delay over and the reverb over. Now, what's cool about sending these kind of effects to sends is that using this little blue bit right here, you can actually control the amount of delay or the amount of reverb that you want without affecting the original signal. So just kind of super cool for me. Oh, and since that's the lead, we'll copy the same guitar chain over. Now, if you're like me or if you're like most folks, you'll use a certain kind of tone for the rhythm and then maybe a different kind of tone for the lead, just so we get a little bit of texture in there and it just feels like it's not all coming out of the same, speaker, obviously. And then for clean guitars, sometimes when you get clean guitars to mix, they already come sounding well enough by themselves. But if you've got like a clean amp tone that's kind of your go-to, mine's the Pod Farm. Yeah, I've got Pod Farm. I like the 21st Century Clean preset. It's got a whole bunch of stuff going on. There's the setup. There it is. It's already got a delay and a reverb built into it, so I'll tweak it from there if I want to. Since I've got 2 clean guitar tracks, I'll just make, 2 clean presets that I already know that I like. Tweak them later. Now, I'm going to take all of these guitar tracks and send them to their own guitar bus. And I'm going to make that red just so we get a little bit more uniformity. So now that that's done, and just be diligent. Let's find our EQ. Set that back to 80. Why is that taking me so long? There we go. And then, yeah, that'll probably stay right there. Now let's make some bass tracks. Let's just do 2 for now. I like my bass purple. Now, I don't know if this was something that I did subliminally or if I did it on purpose and I just forgot, but my bass has always been purple because I like a solid, deep bass, if you know what I mean. Deep purple, man. If you're a classic rock fan, then I think you'll appreciate that. Let's open these up too. What's going on? There we go. Now, the reason why I've got 2 bass tracks is because if you get a bass DI, I usually like to mult them out, which means I've got 1 bass track that's just going to have the low content, the low end information of the bass, and I'm going to have a separate bass track that's just going to have the high end, that clanky, rattly, chains sounding bass that you hear in a lot of heavy bass music these days. Now, of course, they're identical tracks, but I've filtered them differently. So I already know that roughly, let's call this bass low. Let's call this bass high, just so I don't get confused. Now, the bass low track, of course, that's the low end. I will low pass it down. Let's just float around 200-ish. I know that's where I usually like it to sit, so I'll just set her there. Let's do another EQ on the bass high. This will be the opposite. My bass high starts around 500-ish, so we'll let it go there. And I already know that I like not only do I like a solid low-end bass, I don't like it to move anywhere. So I pull over little CLA 76 mono. Just throw the bass preset on there for now. Tweak it later if you want to. I also like to limit the crap out of my low-end bass as well, so I'll just have that going. We're not going to mess with the threshold or the ceiling right now because that's super dependent on the actual bass DI track itself. And I also know from experience that I like to limit the high end as well, just so that stays more consistent too. Let's create a bass bus now. There. Now, of course, if you don't like to limit your bass, or if you don't like to mult out your bass the same way I do, you don't have to use these plugins or anything. If you already know how you like your bass to sound, usually, most of the time, just use your regular effects chain that you find yourself going back to and just putting it here in its place. You don't have to use my compressor or whatever else. Now, I'm going to make this bass bus purple because OCD is kicking in. And I'm going to do another EQ on the bass. There, don't let anything below 37-ish sneak out. And then you know what, just for a little bit more rigidity, I'm going to put another limiter at the end of my bass bus. Boom. So there we go. Let's add. Now right now we're just being kind of speculative. We're not going to go over the top with like a kick in track and a kick out track and a kick sub track and a snare top and a snare bottom. We are just going to do some basic stuff, and you'll see here what I mean in just a second. There. So let's make a kick track, a snare track, and a tom 1 and a tom 2 track. Like always, the kick track's not going to have anything below 35-ish going out. If I wanted to be bold, I could probably just mosey on over to the 500 range and just suck that out, probably. But I don't know. Even though I do that most of the time, I don't want to, bake that into my template just yet. I'm not prepared for that because not every kick needs that. Let's go over to the snare. Oh, and you know what? What else do I like on my kick tracks? Kicks are usually in mono, so we'll do an SSL comp on the mono. That's there. Now, of course, we can dive into the presets. Get out of there. Dive into the presets and see what our options are, but we don't have anything to listen to like see what we like. So, but I know I'm probably gonna put a SSL compressor on there, so I'll just have it ready. Same goes for the snare. Snare's usually in mono, so we can put a mono compressor on there. Same goes for toms. Even though they're panned, they're still technically a mono track. Let's see. Oh, I also like to send these shells that we've made to their own shell bus, where of course there's a surprise, another EQ, and there's another SSL compressor, but this one's going to be in stereo. Even though we've put a mono compressor on these individual shell tracks, because we've panned the toms, we want to send them to a stereo compressor now. And again, we'll tweak all these things much later when we actually have something to listen to. But for now, odds are an SSL comp is going to be in the chain somewhere, so just put it in there now. Make the shell bus blue to match the other ones. Oh, and you know what else I like to do? Yeah, I'll do that now. I usually end up, now of course, the more you do this, the more you learn what you like and you learn what you don't like, and you go to your old standbys. I like a JST clip on my shell bus. I think I like to put that before the compressor. Right around there. And of course, if I pull in all the drum tracks and I think this is too much or not enough, I'll change it later. I want to make a room track as well, because if you're receiving drum tracks from another engineer, they're probably going to have a room track in them. Or even if you've programmed your drums using, Slate or Get Good or whatever else, there's a drum option in there too that you can export down to a WAV file and mix it later on. That's going to have another EQ. I don't like a ton of low end in the rooms, and I don't like a ton of high end in the rooms either. That's what the actual overhead tracks are for. But you know what? I do know that I like I've got a DBX compressor by Waves that I like to use. Let's just go ahead and cue up the, where did it go? I can't, there it is. I probably looked at it 2 times and scrolled past it 4 times. There, let's just cue up the room mics preset on the DBX compressor on the drum room track itself, just because we're probably going to end up using it. And you know what? Super cool stuff. Let's go back to the guitars. If you've got 2 or 3 different VSTs that you like to use, cue them up, man. If you've got a couple of different compressors that you like to use on certain shells or certain room tracks, cue those up too. Let's turn all these off. Now, the reason why we're queuing up so many different effects and then turning them off, we're going to save this template with all the plugins disengaged, and here's why. When you go to pull up this template from scratch and you're ready to pull in some files to start mixing, your computer is going to have a heck of a time loading all of these plugins while they're enabled. It's just your computer's gonna lose its mind, man, and it's liable to shut down on you and just blow up. But it's a lot easier for your CPU to load up this template with everything disengaged, because it's just so much less work. Plus, if you find out that you've only got one lead track, well, you can just engage that one lead track and then delete the other lead track. You know what I mean? For guitar. So, yeah, something to think about. Let's keep going. Do we have a shell bus? Did we make a room? Yeah, no, let's make a room bus as well. Even though we've got one room track, I'm still going to make a room bus, just so my routing's, even. Nothing wrong with it. We'll do another EQ on the room bus, and I'll probably end up clipping the room bus as well. Why not? Now let's make some overhead tracks. Let's say we've got an overhead track, hi-hat, a China, a splash, and a ride. That's 5. That's going to be 5. We'll make the overhead tracks yellow because most cymbals are yellow. That's going to be our overhead track. That's going to be our hi-hat. This one we'll call a China. This one we'll label splash. This one will be a ride. There we go. Bare minimum. Again, if you're receiving, raw files to mix from a live drum session from an engineer, you're probably going to end up with most of these tracks, or, all of them. So let's pull up. We already know. Let's pull an EQ. This is a surprise to you by now. You've not been paying attention. Let's pull up an EQ on the overhead track. Again, from experience, and you'll learn this over the months and years that you get to do this, I don't like a lot of low end in the overhead tracks, but I do want to keep the high end in there. Let's go up a little bit more. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Now, let's pull over a stereo limiter for the overhead tracks, because now overhead tracks are typically 2 microphones spaced, evenly apart. That way you get a pretty good picture of the kit while it's actually playing. What am I looking for? Oh yeah, stereo limiter. Now I go back and forth between compressing overheads and limiting overheads, but I don't know. Right now, let's just plug in a limiter. Let's do the same thing for the hi-hat. Usually folks will mic a hi-hat individually. They'll mic a China. They'll put another microphone on the splash and on the ride if they have enough microphones and enough inserts as well. So let's just cue those up too. Now again, we're not messing with the threshold or the ceiling at all at this point, because it doesn't matter. Whatever we do here, we're just going to be undoing when we actually get the track in there. So just have the plugin ready to go. We are going to make a bus for the overhead tracks, and that's going to be yellow. There we go. Again, let's put the default EQ back on there. There we go. Put a tight EQ on there. Oh, let's add some vocals as well, because in most cases, if you get hired to mix a song, it's going to come with vocals. Probably. Let's cue up 5 mono vocal tracks. Call these main vocals. And let's cue up another 5 background vocals. You know why I make the vocals green? Because that's where the money is, baby. There we go. So again, I already know that I'm going to want to EQ on my vocals. My vocal EQ is somewhere, at least the low cut is somewhere around like 80 or 150 depending. Let's just chuck it at 100 for now. And again, speaking from experience, I like the Joey Sturgis gain reduction compressor on this thing. It's a beast, man. It just does what it does so well. So there. Copy that same main Vox track effect from one, just paste it onto the other 1, 2, 3, 4 main Vox tracks that you have. Now you'll probably want to add a little bit of reverb onto the vocal as well. So let's just handle that now. Room reverb. Let's send that on a send. Again, we could set, whatever preset we wanted now. It doesn't matter. It's just going to change later. Let's just go factory halt. It doesn't matter. Boom, boom. There we go. Excuse me. Now we noticed another room reverb effects send pop up over here. That's going to be the main Vox verb. Let's drag the same EQ and compressor from the main Vox over to the background Vox. Now, usually I don't love using the same verb for the main Vox as I do for the background Vox. So I'm going to do another instance of this reverb, and I'll paste that there. And here's what happens. So you've got your main Vox verb, and here's another effects verb that just popped up. That's going to be your background Vox verb. That way you can kind of control the wetness and dryness of the main vocals and the background vocals independently. Super cool. Oh, and what haven't we done yet? We have not made buses for these vocals. Let's do that now. Let's make a main Vox bus. And if you're following along, you know that's going to be bright green. Let's make a background Vox bus. There we go. That's going to be dark green because background is usually a little bit darker, a little more in the back. Chuck an EQ over there, right around 114, I guess is where we landed. Now, in addition to all of these compressors over here on the main, or actually on any of the vocal tracks, on the vocal bus themselves, I like to send another compressor on top of there. I usually end up going with the Waves L2. We'll do a stereo one in case we have any panning going on. There we go. And same for the Vox bus, for the backgrounds at least. There we go. Now, let's grab, now that I think we've got everything in there. You could do the same thing for like effects or synth tracks or, like stuff for bass drops and stuff, but you get it. You just create more tracks and you label them and you just kind of figure out what you'll probably use and then you'll set them up later. But for now, let's just grab the guitar bus, the bass bus. Ooh, you know what I skipped? Notice we have a shell bus, a room bus, and an overhead bus. Let's make our lives a little bit easier and route all of those to what I'm going to call an all drum bus. And that'll be white. So now, let's grab our guitar bus again, our bass bus, and the all drum bus. You'll notice I just grabbed all the instruments and made them into their own little bus. Let's call this the music bus. Did I put a space in there? Music bus. There it goes. Have that be white as well, just because that's the pattern that I've, ingrained into myself. Now, since we have a music bus, let's make a vocal bus as well. There we go. Now, don't laugh, but we're going to make another bus from the music bus and the Vox bus combined. And we're going to call this our fake master. There we go. Now, let's go back to the music bus again. At this point, the music bus is probably ready to go. I mean, you don't have to do a whole bunch of stuff, but I do want to put like a tiny little high pass on there. I will put another EQ on the all Vox bus and just reinforce that 100 hertz roll off that I'm usually floating close to on vocals. And there we go. So listen, I know all these buses sound ridiculous. Why do you have so many funnels and everything's going to everything else? And then you made this fake master for some reason. I don't even know what that's all about. But look, I'll explain all of this now. Say you export this and you take it out to your car and you listen to it and you say, you know what? Gosh, I wish I had the vocals turned up. Well, if you come back into your session, instead of grabbing all 10 of these vocal tracks individually and turning them up, you can just grab this one Vox bus that you've made and crank it up there. Same thing. If you know what, you get to your car and you say, you know what, I think I mixed the overheads. I think I mixed the cymbals too loud on this track. Instead of going here and grabbing all 5 of these individual tracks and turning them down, you just grab the one overhead bus track and turn that down instead, buddy. Easy peasy. This goes back to, again, making your life easier later by doing the work now. Imagine you setting this up while the band is there in the same room with you. How annoying would that be? Okay, I just can't imagine. It just makes my skin crawl, man. I just get upset thinking about it. So do all this stuff now. Figure out what you're probably going to be doing. Learn from your past mistakes. Learn from what you like, what you don't like, and just make your template like this, man. Now, let me explain this fake master. It's kind of convoluted and tricky, but I'm going to try and just make it digestible for everybody and for myself, so that I can easily explain it too. Check this out. So now, if the band that you're mixing for has let you know that they've actually hired a mastering engineer separately from you, and they're going to have him master it for you, or even if you're going to pass it off to your studio partner or to your buddy to master it for you, you can still create this fake master and put in your mastering chain so that you can mix into your mastering chain. That way you kind of know what it's going to sound like by the time you get the actual master back. It's not, you're not going to have any surprises. Now, of course, if that's the case, when you're ready to hit export, you just disengage your master chain and then hit export right there with all of this fake master plugins disabled. I'm not going to load all mine in right now, but like my fake master usually consists of another EQ, surprise, surprise, a compressor, a limiter, some sparkle magic on the top end, and another EQ at the end, just to tighten up the low end and the high end again. You've seen all that before, so I'm not going to make you look at it again, but you would disable those if you were going to have somebody else master it and then hit export. Another reason is this. Say the band has said to you, you know what, we kind of want the song to have like a 4 Year Strong vibe, or Upon a Burning Body vibe, whatever, fill in the blank, it doesn't matter. You can now, if you haven't already, let's just, where are we at? It doesn't matter, let's just pull this track in. So even though this track says bass DI, we're going to pretend that this is our reference for your strong track. Now, if you've been paying attention up to this point, every single track that you've made and routed, none of it, not a single track goes to the main stereo out that your DAW made for you, except for this reference track. And here's what I'm getting at. If you drop in this reference track, it's going to bypass all of these buses that you've made, and it's going to bypass your fake master, and it's going to get dropped right into this stereo out that your DAW made for you. Now, if you've got your mastering chain enabled, and that means that you're not going to have to listen to this reference track that's professionally mixed and mastered already go through your mastering chain. It just bypasses all of it and gets dumped right into the stereo out that your DAW made for you. Pretty easy, man. So now you can actually see how your mix stacks up against another professional mix, and see if you're in the ballpark that the band kind of wants you to be in. So there's actually plugins that allow you to do that, to A and B quickly, without having to set up this fake master routing situation. But all the good ones and all the ones that are worth their salt are in the $100 to $200 range and up. So save yourself a few $100 and just make a fake master track for yourself. That's what I would do. So there. I think that's everything that I wanted to go over here in the template. Oh, as far as actually saving this thing, come up to File. Now, of course, your DAW might be different. It probably is, but go up to File. There's probably a Save As template or a Save Template button. Just click on this thing, name it whatever you want, and go from there. So there. That's it, man. Do the work now so you don't have to do it later. Make the rest of your life easier. This probably took a half hour or so for you to actually figure all this out. And of course, another thing that I wanted to touch on, I know I feel like I'm rambling right now, and I am, but another thing that I wanted to touch on was your skill level and your tastes are going to evolve and grow with you. And of course, your template is going to evolve and grow alongside you as well. Your template's going to be ever changing, and that's a good thing because you don't want to be stuck in the same thing. Now again, templates are not so that every song and every band can sound the same. Templates for me mostly are just to get all the heavy lifting out of the way. I always route my vocals to a vocal bus. I always route my guitars to a guitar bus. You get it. I always use the same few effects on a given track. So I just have those ready to go, man, and I just audition which ones I think sound the best at the time and then ditch the others. I think I'm going to send it back to Studio Tom now. Back to you, Studio Tom. So there you have it. That's how I make my templates. I hope you learned something. If you did, give me a like. Consider subscribing as well. Tell me what was the one thing that you learned that you can't wait to start using in the comments in the low end. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want your music mixed by us here at Droids Recording Studio, contact any of the contact links in the low end. Look forward to chatting with you. Until next time, always use your blinker and change your strings.